John D. Rockefeller is an incredibly big part of not only American history, but also the world's history. In case you've only heard the name, but aren't sure what the fuss is all about, he was the man behind the Standard Oil Company. You know, the founding father of just about any petroleum company that exists today. So, to say he was the wealthiest American of all time and the richest person in modern history is kind of an understatement, don't you agree? We'll prove it. He had an incredible net worth that, in today's money, would have been even far larger than even that of Elon Musk, and he had no reservations about spending it lavishly either. Yes, he spent it on the usual things, such as mansions and cars, but he also spent it on his hair, yes, really, and his life, so to speak. So join us as we take a look at the lifestyle of John D. Rockefeller. Just because we are about to step way back in time, we can promise you this is one history lesson you are going to want to pay attention to. For starters, the late Mr. Rockefeller and Jada Pinkett Smith have a pretty hot topic in common. No, Mrs. Rockefeller didn't slap anyone, that we know of, but they both had or have a certain condition. We'll tell you all about it a bit later. Rockefeller was born in Richford, New York on July 8, 1839. He passed away at the age of 97 on May 23, 1937. This just goes to show that with enough money, just about anything is possible. Interestingly enough, even though Rockefeller's own father was a con man, he himself made his living the honest way and excelled at it. He became an assistant bookkeeper at the age of 16 and then went into several business partnerships beginning at age 20, concentrating his business on oil refining. In 1870, he eventually founded the Standard Oil Company, the big fish, the one that grew so large that the Supreme Court ordered it to be dissolved and broken up into several smaller companies. Let's just say that if he were alive today, you would have made him even richer every time you pulled up to an Exxon or Mobil to fill up. We guess you could put him in the same class as the Rothschilds. He saw a gap in the market, he took it, made a massive success out of it, and lived to tell the tale. While he ran the Standard Oil Company until 1897, he then went on to remain at the helm as its largest shareholder. He also diversified a little bit. With his profits, he invested heavily in gold and the property market, but it's how he spent his fortune that will leave you breathless. Before we get into that part though, how much do you think he was worth? Well, in today's money, having a fortune of 1.4 billion US dollars doesn't really sound that impressive, right? No, it doesn't. But what if we told you that he had 1.4 billion back then, and in today's money, it would have been a whole lot more. So much more that if you work inflation into the mix, Mr. Rockefeller would not only have been the richest man on earth, he would have been far richer than Elon Musk. Quite ironic, isn't it? The man who started the oil refining industry would have been far richer than the man who started the clean energy drive, had they both been alive today. In today's money, Rockefeller's 1.4 billion US dollars would have been somewhere in the area of slightly north of 400 billion. That is almost unimaginable. Just think about the lifestyle he would have lived, the cars he would have driven, and the mansions he would have built. Actually, he indulged in all of that, plus a little more, way back then. Rockefeller's car collection included a 1917 Crane Simplex model, a 1946 Chrysler Town Car limousine, and a 1902 Thomas model. We are not really sure which one of these is more impressive. The Crystal limousine was incredibly beautiful, a true classic. Apparently, he used it to pick up his kids from school. Just imagine that. The Crystal limo is a one-of-a-kind car, custom-built for Rockefeller himself. It boasted incredible luxuries, such as a dual cowl and suicide doors at the rear, a divider window, dual heaters, vanity mirrors, and ample wood trimmings. It was fitted with chrome trim and white wall tires and had an 8-cylinder engine and 3-speed hydromatic transmission. Might not sound like much today, but let us tell you, back in the day, this was what luxury looked like. The Crane Simplex wasn't really that far behind. Today, it's considered a landmark car. Simplex cars were among the largest, most powerful, and most expensive of the early 20th century, boasting 100 horsepower and a top speed of nearly 90 miles per hour in an era barely removed from horse-drawn carriages. But if we have to be completely honest, it's the 1902 Thomas model that takes home the gold. We mean, just look at it. Even Rockefeller knew it was the royalty of cars. Apparently, he only ever drove it on the roads of his estate. Plus, he only drove it for a single season and then stored it in the estate's coach house. With that in mind, Care to venture a guess as to how many miles the Thomas had on the odometer when Rockefeller parked it for good? A mere 310. That's it. Pretty remarkable, isn't it? However, if you thought these classic cars were remarkable, just wait till we tell you about his mansions. Let's just say Vladimir Putin and his secret Black Sea mansion wouldn't have come close to the kind of homes Rockefeller built. But first, what exactly does, or did, we're not sure which tense to use here. So let's just say, what does Rockefeller and Jada Pinkett Smith have in common? Well, at the start of his 40s, Rockefeller was diagnosed with the same autoimmune condition as Pinkett Smith, alopecia areata. He quickly started losing all of the hair on his head, including his mustache and body. His hair never grew back, and in the early 1900s, the oil tycoon began to wear rotating wigs of various lengths to give the impression of his hair growing and being shorn. And believe it or not, this was one of his biggest expenses. Actually, never mind the money he spent on the wigs, can you imagine how they must have been organized? Given the fact that he desperately wanted to hide his condition, he must have rotated the different length wigs perfectly. This might also, to some extent, explain why he had so many monstrously large mansions. Obviously, they were places he felt safe in. Speaking of feeling safe, stick around to hear the extent he went to keep himself safe and alive. Rockefeller had some of the biggest and most luxurious mansions known to man. He had a Manhattan home on the Upper East Side. He also owned Hudson Pines, a country home set on 75 acres in Westchester County. Then there was Ringing Point, the summer home in Seal Harbor, Maine, as well as Four Winds, the Norman-style farmstead in Columbia County, New York. Much like with his car collection, though, there's one mansion in particular that stands out from all the others, Kykid. Kykid, also known as the John D. Rockefeller Estate, is a 40-room historic house museum in Pocantico Hills, a hamlet in the town of Mount Pleasant, New York. Conceived largely by his son John D. Rockefeller Jr. and enriched by the art collection of the third-generation descendant, Governor of New York and Vice President of the United States Nelson Rockefeller, it was home to 4 generations of the family. Today, the house is a National Historic Landmark owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The name Kykid is Dutch for lookout. The gardens surrounding the mansion have a pretty interesting backstory as well. Initially, they were designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, which is the firm that designed Manhattan's Central Park. Yes, the Central Park. But Rockefeller wasn't impressed with the work, so he redid it all himself. If that doesn't describe his wealth, then we don't know what will. Oh wait, we do know. We know exactly what described his wealth. But before we tell you more, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. We've told you how much Rockefeller was worth back in the day, and we told you how much his $1.4 billion would have been worth in today's money. But let's put his wealth into some real perspective for you. He hired substitutes to fight for him in the Civil War, as in he paid a few men so much money that they were perfectly willing to risk their lives during war. For us, that really puts his wealth on the map.